Good evening, everybody.
What's up, everybody?
I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah, I'm doing good, too. I'm doing really good here.
Yeah, if it had anything in it, I'd be doing even better.
Yeah.
I got spoiled.
I'm going to crank a zoom shot in on this.
Yeah,
look
do
at
it,
this.
do it.
Just look at this stuff, guys.
Yeah.
If you're not watching on YouTube, you're missing out. There you go.
Yeah.
That's it.
Look at that. We got the
swag.
merch. Yeah, the merch.
These are just to get your appetite started just a little bit.
Tease you.
I had my wife Karen make a few little trinkets.
She is a champion, man.
I know. So it's really cool looking. That logo just plays well on a lot of different
Peter
things.
was giving me and Pat. He was kind of rubbing in our faces there.
Yeah.
I was so jealous. I mean, like literally, I was envious. He sent that to me, and I was like, "Oh no!"
I know all Pat's been talking about is how he wanted a coffee cup, and then Peter sends it. Check out my coffee cup.
I got a coffee cup right here. So
issue number 1.
And it's
tuned.
a big one because that was one thing I was gonna say. I don't like the small ones where you can only get like 10 ounces.
There's no point to that.
I need a mug.
Yep.
So welcome to Reverent and Rebellious, we got an episode for you.
Yeah,
today.
we do. Yes, we do.
So what you need to do is not only hit the subscribe button, you not only need to ring the bell on YouTube, but you need to share this with somebody.
Yep.
Just get that person in your mind that you want to share this with, because we're gonna cover some territory today.
Yeah, we are. We're gonna ruffle some feathers.
That's it.
Yep. Hit that like button and comment below. Like as we're going through this episode, guys, feel free to comment while we're going.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to see it live time, which who knows? Maybe one day we might do a live stream.
That would be cool.
But we're not doing it live, but we love the comments, and we will go back and we read the comments. And I actually, speaking of, we had quite a few, I think, on the last video.
Yes, we did. We did. We had a number of comments.
Pat's usually our man on this.
I'm slipping, man.
They were really good ones too.
And even on the older episodes, I go back and check the comments.
Yep. Because people go back and listen to back episodes.
That is true. And we will, before long, we're going to have an email address set up.
It exists right now. I just don't have it. I haven't actually tested it yet.
Yeah.
So you'll be able to email questions to us. So we want to do some question and answer episodes and all that kind of stuff.
All right. So my man Alan, he's confused by Bitcoin as well.
Yeah.
Hey, I feel you. I'm still trying to get it. Amber, thank you. Great podcast. Slot machines years ago, when they still used quarters and buckets, were kind of fun in moderation. But I don't think swiping a card would be as fun nowadays.
That's true.
She don't get the fun scratch offs though.
Yeah.
I actually got to thinking about that because I think I commented back to her and said that doesn't sound as fun, but it actually sounds more dangerous because I feel like
really
you would not realize how much
empty
money.
the bank account at that point.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like I feel like you would be like, I've probably only spent about $50, and you open it, it's like, I have no money.
Yeah, if I could swipe my card, man, like I said, the bank would just catch on fire.
Yes.
I just feel like it's that easy to get away with.
Yep.
So today we're going to turn the corner, and we are going to tackle head on what is in our world today, in Christian world today.
Before we do that,
Oh my gosh, what?
He was going to try to dodge it.
You have to tell us a joke.
He was trying to get out of it.
Okay.
I'm never going to let it slide.
What's the difference between a guitar player and a large pizza?
Oh, I don't know.
A large pizza can actually feed a family of 4.
I'm personally attacked again. Fair enough. Good job.
Thank you.
I like that one. Yeah,
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
All right, what are we talking about?
We are talking about the largest controversy in Christian world today, and that is what is the role of women in ministry, in leadership, in pastorship, just in anything besides making a casserole.
Oh, so we're going to get into full-on gender roles.
Yeah, well, yes, we are going to do that because there are a number of people in their camps that say women are limited in their ability to lead in churches, certainly not be pastors, not be,
Yeah.
And then there are those over on God's side, on the other side, that say, all all roles in leadership are open equally to men and women.
Yep.
There are, and so on one side, we're going to use a couple of terms here that you'll become familiar with. One is complementarian.
Okay.
And that is the position that says that men and women are equal in importance, but have different roles to play prescribed by Scripture, and they complement each other.
Okay.
And, I don't think it's ironic that the men always have the more powerful part of it, and the women always
that's our part of that role is deciding who gets what side.
Yeah, exactly, right. And then the other is egalitarian, which is a position that says just what I just said. It's all equal.
Yeah.
And there are various. You can build a case for either side in Scripture.
Yep.
By being faithful to Scripture. It really has to do with the nuances in the interpretation of Scripture. How do we interpret these particular words?
The tenses, right?
It has to do with tenses. It has to do with, we'll find a couple of different words in here that actually Paul only uses one time, and they're found nowhere else in Scripture. And these are little controversial words. Because we don't see them elsewhere in Scripture, we're not exactly sure how to take them.
Yeah.
And so we sometimes take them at face value, and maybe we're not supposed to take them at face value.
Right.
Well, and I will preface too by saying this is one of those things. I had somebody explain there's kind of certain biblical things. There's a primary and then a secondary.
That's right.
And then I guess tertiary would be the third level. But they were saying an issue like this is kind of a secondary thing where primary, basically your faith, if you don't agree with these things in your primary, then you're most likely not saved.
That's it.
Yeah,
And
primary doctrine.
Yeah. Secondary would be this kind of thing.
Disputable matters, Paul calls them.
And it ain't going to send you to hell whatever side of the fence you're on.
No.
And tertiary is like the color of the chairs.
Yeah. Or
Exactly.
age of the earth.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that age of earth fall in there?
Oh,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it's, before we go in, how old do you think the earth is?
I know for a fact it's at least 37 years old.
Yeah.
I do know that. I can vouch for it being almost 61 years old.
There it is.
I just want to know, are you a new earther or old earther?
I tend, first of all, I just don't care.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't really.
We don't care about them dinosaurs.
No.
Yeah.
I tend to have a problem with an over literal rendering of especially Old Testament Scripture, especially so.
So saying it's 6,000 years.
Exactly. We were talking off air beforehand, and I was making the statement that we as humans, in all of the creation, are the ones with the least amount of knowledge and perspective because we are hopelessly suppressed by sin.
Right.
But we have the know-how.
But
man.
we think that we know it all.
Yeah, we got it figured out.
Yeah.
And we also forget that in the maybe after the fall of man, humans lived 1,000 years, right?
Yeah.
Because they were still close enough to the original
Being
model.
perfect,
Yeah,
almost,
exactly. So some of this stuff, these concepts that were sort of downloaded, they actually probably knew more about this stuff than we do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we are thousands and thousands of years away. Who knows how many? So, just for the record, I have a hard time with the idea that the Earth was created in basically 6 24-hour days.
Gotcha.
Now, what does that mean? I don't know. I don't care if it was a billion years or 10 days. It
doesn't affect the salvation.
At all.
Well, and honestly, our creation accounts are really meant to not to point us to the system of creation, but to the one who created it.
Creator.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
And we learn more about the nature of God from the way that that God creates things, as opposed to the creation myths of other cultures.
Yeah.
And that's what's so funny too is Genesis 1 and Genesis 2, they're retelling of the same story, a faraway God and a close God. It shows that he works on things at a cosmic level and a very personal level.
That's exactly right.
And that's what the Genesis creation narrative is showing us.
There you go. There is a prime example of tertiary.
Yeah. I'm glad we spent some time on
They
it.
didn't know I was even going to throw that in there.
I didn't.
I didn't know that you even knew the word tertiary.
I
haven't known it very long.
I was going to ask you to spell it.
Gosh.
No, the ability to spell it is tertiary.
Yes.
So anyway, so what we're going to do is we're going to start there. We're going to start there, and I'm just going to lay out my basic framework for the whole complementarian egalitarian debate.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay, so because
Pat, will you turn the air back on?
Yeah,
I'm getting hot over here.
okay,
Yeah, I am. Guys, y'all shouldn't even hear this. I pretty well, I think I'll clean this up out of here. But yeah, I'm getting hot over here.
okay.
You know how hot? It's that big word I used.
It was. It kind of got your brains.
It does, yeah.
Exactly. Anyway, so here we see now the complementarian viewpoint says that that this is God's design for men to be basically to have the final say, to have the final vote, to be the leader in their homes, and that women are to be the followers, basically, to support people.
Yeah,
I done messed up somewhere then.
Yeah. And I just want to start by looking at God's design. And if you look at Genesis 1, 2, and 3, which 3 is the fall of man. Okay, so we see that it says God created human, Adam. And he created them. And it says male and female, he created them. Mm-hmm. And then he said it's not good for man to be alone.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that doesn't mean, God created male and female, said it was good, very good. But then he said it's not good.
Yep.
So God
changed his mind.
Misdesigned something. He didn't design it correct. No, he designed it exactly like he wanted to. But it sounds like that it's not good for man to be alone. Oh, he's going to be lonely. I mean, he's going to. But
it's
no, male and female were contained in one unit.
One vessel.
Okay, so he says it's not good for man.
Hermaphrodite.
Yeah, to the highest degree. and God said, it's not good for man to be contained in one unit. In other words, it's time to separate them so that they can come back together and make other humans.
Yeah.
So when God puts Adam into a deep sleep, that word for rib is actually the word for side, and that is covenant cutting language. So God separates the male from the female and then builds this female out of Adam's other side.
And that shows the caringness of God to put you to sleep before he rips your rib
That's
out.
Exactly right.
He could have just gone boom and just jerked that rib out.
But it's all, you have to remember also that Genesis is poetry. It is not a scientific book in any way. It's poetry. So this is imagery. This is,
Could you repeat that again? Is that what kind of book?
It is not a scientific book. Pay
attention to that.
It is poetry. And so now we have a male side and a female side, and they're separate. And then God says, now you get to join back together and become one flesh, one human being, just as the original design, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so now we have a male and we have a female, and God commissions them, and this is priestly language, commissions them to work the garden, to keep the garden, which is like protect the garden, and then to go forth, multiply, and subdue the earth around the garden.
Equally.
Yes.
Wonder what they were protecting the garden from.
Well, it really is more in the terms of keeping it in order.
Gotcha.
Making order out of something that doesn't have order.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and we know that there were borders to the garden.
Right.
That there was chaos outside the garden. And so they were supposed to expand the borders of the garden to eventually and ultimately cover the whole earth. Mm-hmm. Okay. So that was equality, just as a team. They were both equally commissioned. Now, then, of course, they sin. And they have to be put out of the garden. And that's an act of mercy, because God doesn't want them to eat of the tree of life in their fallen state and thus be fallen forever and ever and ever.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So God pronounces the curse. He didn't just make it up on the spot. This is the natural consequences of what you just did.
It's the result of.
That's right.
Yep.
So he says, now you're going to have to work by the sweat of your brow to tend the ground, when in the garden, inside the garden, it was easy to do that. Now you're going to have to learn what life is like outside the garden.
Right.
Okay. And so then part of this curse, he says to the woman, he says, your desire will be for your husband, which means you will, for the first time in your young life, you will have this odd desire to control your husband.
Yeah.
You never had that desire before. But because your husband is male and therefore more aggressive and larger than you and has more muscles than you, he will rule over you.
Right.
He will not know why he wants to rule over you. He's never wanted to rule over you before. But now This is the way it's going to be.
So there's just going to be that tension.
Yeah, exactly. And so we see that this idea of gender roles is not God's original design.
Yeah, it's quite literally an imbalance from the fall.
It is part of the curse.
Yep.
And so while it is a reality, that doesn't make it right.
Yeah.
That's right.
It doesn't make it God's design. So we just also need to know right off the bat, before we get down deep into these different characters and different scriptures that we're going to look at, we need to know that that the Hebrews, the Israelites, the ones that belong to Yahweh, were decidedly more kind to women in ancient times than any of the other cultures around them.
Really?
Yes, for sure. There are more mention of, now, other cultures had goddesses, mythical figures that did mythical things.
Yeah.
But as far as their treatment of actual women that walked on the face of the earth, they were basically one step above animals, livestock.
Okay. Yeah.
So the way that...
So like Islam.
Maybe. I've never been one, so I don't know. So we see sprinkled throughout Scripture these very... every time you see one, you have to pay close attention.
Yeah.
Because these things just didn't happen.
Right.
In the culture that the Old Testament was written in.
Yep.
So, Pat, do you know of any women leaders in the Old Testament?
Yeah. And Judges, man.
Yeah? Anyone in particular?
We got Deborah.
Yes.
I'm a fan of Deborah.
We have Deborah, and there's a couple things about Deborah that we need to know. Deborah was one of the judges, and the judges we know came before the kings, right?
Right.
So God set up judges among people. So she was called by God to be a judge. Now, some people will say, it's because all the other men were worthless, and so in the absence of a faithful man, then a woman has to step in to do the job.
Doesn't God empower everyone anyway that's a judge?
Yes, that is exactly right.
Could any of them been any worse than Samson, though? I mean, really?
Man.
I'm thinking if he could use Samson, I'm pretty sure he could have found a dude if he wanted one.
I completely agree. Yeah. And, in the Chronicles, in the list of judges, actually Samson turned out to be a good judge.
Yeah.
It says he was one of the top ones.
Yeah. That's that. I don't know how I feel about that.
I don't either. But apparently he did a good job.
They didn't consult me on the ranking.
No, made for a compelling story. I mean, I enjoyed the story of Samson.
But yeah, Deborah, man, she was bad.
Well, and here's the thing about Deborah. She was not just a judicial judge. Now it says that she sat under Deborah's palm tree and judged the nation.
Yeah.
She had a husband. Why, if they were both good people, why did God not cause the husband?
Say, does he get mentioned much?
He gets mentioned right at the beginning. Let's see. She used to sit under the palm tree of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim. She is the wife of Lapidoth.
Okay. Did she name her tree after herself?
Yeah, I think she did.
Well, you better not name it after him. That's a horrible name.
Lapidoth?
Yeah.
Lapidoth.
Laugh it off.
Laugh it off.
Yeah. Laugh it off. See, that sounds like a poisonous tree. Tree of Deborah sounds nice.
But here's the thing about Deborah. She's not just a judicial judge. She's not just a wise person.
Yeah.
And by the way, she's judging men as well as women. She wasn't the leader of the women's group. She's also designated as a prophet, which meant that she represented God to the people.
Yep.
Yeah.
And she controls the military. She is the general.
That's right.
And in fact, if you look at Judges 4 and 5, you will find this whole scenario where this guy named Barak, who was like a general kind of guy, comes to Deborah and says, we gotta go conquer this nation because they're becoming a real problem. She says, well, go get the military and go conquer them. And he says, I'm not going without you. I'm not going unless you go along. And I'm not really sure exactly why he says it that way. Either he's timid or he doesn't want to take the hit if things don't go well.
Yeah.
But so she says, okay, I'll go with you, but I want you to know you're not getting credit for this. So you're going to have to tell everybody that a woman conquered that nation. And he goes, okay.
So he didn't care.
No.
He didn't care.
He didn't care. And so they go and they conquered this nation.
Yeah.
Now, here's the funny part of it. because like right toward the end, this dude named Sisera, he was the evil dude. Okay, so he escapes. Deborah says to Barak, "Arise, for this is the day in which the Lord has given Sisera into your hands." And so they rout the whole thing, but Sisera flees on foot, and he ends up in the tent of this woman named Jael.
Yep.
Have you ever heard of Jael?
I feel like the name rings a bell, but I can't recall what happens.
Yeah. So what happens is Sisera comes into Jael's tent, and he says, "Hey, I'm just here. I just happened to come this way." He doesn't tell her anything. She knows who he is. And so she says, "Oh, no problem." So she lays him down, she puts an extra blanket on him, and she brings him some warm milk. And he goes to sleep. And she takes a tent peg and a sledgehammer.
Right through the temple.
Oh, man.
Drives it through his head.
Got him.
Yeah.
Man, that's a good strategy.
It's a really good strategy.
Warm milk.
Yeah. Yeah, he says, "Give me a little water to drink, for I'm thirsty." So she opened a bottle of milk, gave him a drink. Then she covered him up. And
nice.
It's a very good story. But here's my point with Deborah. In chapter 5, all of chapter 5 is the Song of Deborah. The Song of Deborah and Barak. It's really the Song of Deborah.
So they had to add him in there a little bit. We'll give you a little credit, man.
Now, this is a victory song. A victory song that basically it's like a prophetic sort of retelling of what God did for them in allowing them to do this.
Yeah.
We see 7 songs like this. We see actually what it's called Moses' song in Exodus 15, but it's really Miriam's song.
Yep.
Miriam was also a prophetess.
Okay.
And it was her song about what the great things the Lord did. We see another song of Moses in Numbers 21. Another song of Moses in Deuteronomy 32. You're kind of seeing a pattern here. Then we get Deborah's song. Then we get 1 Samuel 2 is Hannah's song when God blesses her and answers her prayer. 2 Samuel 22, we get David's song. That's another victory song. And then the whole Song of Songs is a song, and that was Solomon.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's only 7 songs, and 3 of them are associated with women. And one of them was the general of the army that conquered another country.
Yeah.
Okay,
so almost half.
That's exactly right. 3 out of the 7. That's exactly right. So, and I want to draw our attention to another prominent woman in the Old Testament. She kind of goes under the radar, but she is like super important. It's in 2 Chronicles 34. Now, what's happening in 2 Chronicles 34 is Josiah takes over as king. Now, Josiah is 8 years old when he takes over as king. But 8 years into his reign, he's 16 now. He gets really upset and convicted about the idolatry in the nation and everything else like that. Now, he's got a high priest named Hilkiah. And there's another character in here. It is Shaphan the scribe. So Hilkiah and Shaphan. Okay, so Josiah orders the restoration, like the remodeling of the temple. And so they're digging around in there, and they see this storeroom, which is not supposed to be filled with money, but it's filled with money.
Yeah.
And
dang,
so
that's a bad thing to stumble upon.
I know.
To find a storage room full of money, man, dang.
Storage wars, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
So they clear out all this, and they find a book. Shaphan finds the book. And, or Hilkiah finds it, gives it to Shaphan. Shaphan takes it to the king. And he just says this. He says, Hilkiah the priest gave me a book. And when the king heard the words in the book, he tore his clothes because it was the law.
Okay.
It had been put away in a storeroom behind all the money.
Wow. Huh. Okay. Wow.
And nobody noticed that it was gone.
Wow.
The law was real important to him.
Apparently, at that time it was.
And you'd have to get rid of all the money to find it.
So he calls Hilkiah in there. Now Hilkiah is not innocent in this whole thing. He's a high priest.
Right.
And he finds this book and he doesn't even know what it is. It's like, wow, this is like written in kind of weird language. So anyway, so he calls Hilkiah and Shaphan in, and he says, "Go inquire of the Lord for me and for those who are left in Israel and in Judah, concerning the words of the book which has been found. For great is the wrath of the Lord which is poured out on us, because our fathers have not observed the word of the Lord to do according to all that is written in the world." So Hilkiah goes to find a prophet, because that's how you inquire of the Lord, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So he could have gotten, I don't know, Jeremiah.
Big name at the time.
Yeah. Zephaniah.
Big name at the time.
Uh-huh. Could have gotten all kinds of these different prophets who were prophesying at that time.
Yeah.
He gets Huldah.
Huh.
How about that? He goes right to Huldah. And it's not because there weren't other capable men around. It's because he knew that she knew the word of the Lord.
Right.
She had a reputation. Okay, so they went to Huldah, the prophetess, the wife of Shallum, the son of Tokthah. Now, Shallum is not a prophet. They didn't call him.
Right.
And so maybe he wasn't even the spiritual leader in his home.
Yeah.
Maybe she was.
Surely not.
Okay, anyway. It says she's the keeper of the wardrobe. Now, she probably was gifted in, keeping up the priest's wardrobe, the whole thing.
Yeah.
But it's clear that that she's a prophetess as well. And she says, "Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel." That's what prophets say.
Thus says the Lord.
"Tell the man who sent you to me, thus says the Lord, behold, I am bringing evil on this place and on its inhabitants, even all the curses written in the book, which they have read in the presence of the king of Judah, because they have forsaken me and have burned incense to other gods, that they might provoke me to anger." And she goes on and on and on. "But to the king of Judah who sent you to inquire of the Lord, thus you will say to him." And it's a whole nother chapter. What this does is it causes the king to engage the whole nation in a revival. He goes in and he tears down all of the Asherah poles and all of the
Idol
altars to Baal. He tears them out of the temple.
And he's 16 at the time?
Yeah.
Wow.
And he reinstates the Passover celebration.
Nice.
Yeah, he orders it for everybody. So on a woman's word from the Lord that was declared to the king, it causes this whole thing to be put in motion.
Well, I was just thinking of different, like, women in the Old Testament there, or throughout the Bible in general, but I did think about, couldn't you almost say Ruth to a degree was leading? Because she had, I don't know if some people would just say it's influence, but I don't know, because she had quite a bit of...
You could actually pair her with Naomi.
Yeah.
Who orchestrated the whole thing.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I feel like they really did do some leading, and if you really look at it.
Yep.
So you see, Miriam was the first prophet of any prophets.
Yep.
She was the first one called a prophet. There were many more after her. We see 5 prophets, including Miriam. We see Deborah, Miriam, Huldah. Isaiah's wife was a prophetess.
Yep.
And there's this woman named Noadiah in Nehemiah, who is just mentioned very briefly.
So Isaiah and his wife were like a power couple.
Yes, they were. That's exactly right.
Most of these women are married, it sounds like,
yes,
too.
all of them.
And just a lot of them,
Except
you don't
Miriam.
ever,
I don't think Miriam was. Maybe I don't think she was.
a lot of them, their husbands get like no recognition.
No, they're just hanging
Isaiah got pretty good bit of recognition.
Yeah.
He got the book.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but the rest of them, yeah.
So,
Lapidoff didn't get much.
Not even a tree.
Yeah, he had to just laugh it off.
Not even a tree.
Yeah. It wasn't the tree of laugh it off.
Goofy looking fruit on that sucker.
So now it's important to know, and I want to respect all of my complementarian friends. We don't see any women priests. It was only men. Certainly, basically within the framework and the infrastructure of the community, it was very patriarchal. It was male centric.
Yep.
That's what makes these women so exceptional.
Yeah.
And they're just dropped in there.
Yep.
Like
it's nothing.
They don't belong.
Yeah. And then it came time for Deborah to be the judge.
Yep.
It's like, what? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what happened. And then they called for Huldah.
Yep.
Well, why didn't they call for these? It's just little, breadcrumb trails along the way. And we see this precedent set even in the Old Testament that Yahweh, the God of Israel, treats women differently than and values them.
Well, I'm going to play devil's advocate.
Okay, go ahead.
So surely this is just because it's Old Testament. That's the only reason why they're...
Yeah.
Okay, so there's no example of this in the New Testament, is it?
Man, you are serving me softballs right and left.
I was going to say some serious devil's advocacy.
Well, and see, here's the thing, too, is those who really, kind of hold to this whole system, they go right to the New Testament.
Yeah.
They just sort of, it's like, it's just kind of unique for their time, and they say exactly what you would say. And once again,
I've heard it.
I'm not trying to, I'm not trying to be a hater, anything like that. I just, honestly,
you just want to tell them the truth.
I want to tell them the truth as I feel it's been revealed to me and to others. I'm not the only one that thinks this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I also, I'm not here to win an argument or necessarily to change anybody's mind, because those who have held to a complementarian perspective for all these years, I'm not going to change your mind, and I don't even. I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
totally okay. Yeah. I don't want to just change every church's doctrine and all this kind of stuff.
We said, secondary issue here.
That's it.
Yeah.
So you can stay right there.
Yeah,
it's okay with me. But what I want to do is to free up a lot of people, and especially free up a lot of women who've been told that they need to keep their place, and their place is always going to be secondary.
Yeah.
That is. I just don't believe that's true.
Or people that's on the fence is struggling one way or the other.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
Well, I think there's a lot of people, and I kind of told y'all going into this. Honestly, I never put a lot of thought to it. It just wasn't to laugh a little bit. I had thought way more about the age of the earth than I had this. To tell you the things that I'm like really intrigued.
How often do you think about the Roman Empire?
Oh, man.
Well, in all reality, though, it's as far as my point of view on it goes, as I've always had the mentality that God's going to use whoever he wants to use.
Yeah.
Male, female, whatever. God's going to do what he wants to do. And so that's...
Well, the way that I grew up was kind of in charismatic Pentecostal world. Mm-hmm. And... so I didn't really have a feeling. I didn't know that anybody thought women couldn't preach.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I heard some absolutely incredible sermons preached by women.
Yeah.
I mean,
and
this is kind of, we'll get into the New Testament in just a second, but this is kind of what I thought to myself. Okay, so women are allowed to be, as long as they're out of the country and missionaries, they can lead and teach all they want. Mm-hmm. Even men, doesn't matter. As soon as they set foot on U.S. soil. It's like, no, you're serving at the bake sale.
Yeah. They can lead Sunday schools.
Yeah.
They can lead all these other areas.
They can teach children. They can teach other women.
Yeah.
But they can't.
That's where, because like I told y'all, I got some really great friends that are on that side.
That's right.
And that's their big thing. Because one of my buddies, his thing was, he said, if anybody says women can't serve in ministry, they are wrong.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. He said that is not what this guy lands on. Like, he said that his big thing was pastors and elders.
Yeah.
He said no women pastors and elders. And his premise for those two was because the Greek word, he said, means the same. Like, the Greek word for pastor also means elder. And that's kind of how, he said that's one of the ways he came to his conclusion, which we'll get to some of the verses.
We'll get to some of those for sure. That to me feels like saying, well, women can serve anywhere they want in the church except for the real important ones.
Yeah.
And it's like, so we have to ask the question, is that the way Jesus operated? Is that the way Paul really operated? Is that the way Peter and some of those others, is that the way they really operated?
Yeah.
Because if it's not, then we're taking that too far. We're making up rules where no rules really exist.
Yeah.
And that really is the bottom line.
It'd be the eisegesis.
I think it is bordering on eisegesis because of what we'll get into now. And the other thing I thought about this too is there's the women missionary issue. And then I thought to myself, well, okay, what happens if a woman actually gets up behind the pulpit, preaches the message of salvation, and 59 people get saved? Do we have to throw them back?
Right. We need a redo.
Yeah. Sorry, guys.
And if she can preach a message and 59 people get saved, maybe we should I'll let her preach another one.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I just don't. I don't see how that practically.
I agree. I don't think the Lord's gonna be like mulligan.
Well, and once again, then we'll go back into that. Yeah, but she can preach, but she can't occupy the office.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And once again, there's a church in up in northern Wisconsin. It's a Wesleyan church, and it's pastored by a woman. She's an excellent leader, excellent administrative mind, excellent preacher. Her husband is the worship leader. And this church has exploded in growth. Just recently, they baptized over 200 people on one Sunday.
Dang, wow, man, almost as many as us.
I know. Isn't that crazy?
just by being obedient.
Well, okay, so if you're saying that she's out of bounds for occupying that office, yet there's a church in northern rural Wisconsin that now has like 3 campuses, and they're sitting at like, several thousand people.
You would have to say that that's false.
I don't know how you
you can't rationalize it without making something up, making it a reason why it doesn't work.
Right. And so, okay, so you're saying, well, it's not biblical. It's out of bounds, yet there you go. Okay. Yeah. So and honestly, it is cases like that I think that more resemble what happened in the New Testament than some of the things that we kind of make assumptions about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
So I want to kind of take us through now. In the Gospels, we don't see clear evidence of female leadership.
Right.
But what we see is with every episode in Jesus' ministry, and then as we progress on into the apostles, into Paul, into through the book of Acts, with every one. Now, people will say the same thing about slavery. The Bible. Jesus didn't condemn slavery. Paul didn't condemn slavery. But with each episode, it gets more and more liberated.
Yeah.
They continue to push against that. And that's kind of what we see in the Gospels, is that Jesus is valuing women, that Jesus has compassion for women. He elevates women. Yep. We know that there were many women that traveled with him. Yep. There were many women who actually provided the funding for most of his ministry. Yeah. Yep. So where did they get their money? They might have been, it was not uncommon in Jesus' time, and certainly in Paul's time, for there to be women who were heads of their household. Most of them were widows. Some of them were not widows, but they were the ones in charge of the money, in charge of, the administration of the household. So we know that from history. That's not even, we don't have to go to the Bible for that.
So is that like even, I'm just trying to imagine that time, would that be like, say the husband was a carpenter and the wife stayed at home, she still controlled the money? Or would she?
We see instances of that.
Gotcha.
They're not super common.
Yeah.
But in Roman culture, they weren't too offended by that.
Yeah.
It's like, maybe the husband's like off to war all the time, or something like that. So they became capable leaders, and they just led through all of these situations.
Yeah. Gotcha.
So, and oftentimes also in their culture, if the husband did die, then it would go to the next man. But instead, the woman stepped up and became the head of the household.
Yeah.
Right. That kind
Wouldn't
of thing.
they have a thing where sometimes if the husband died, his brother or something would take...
that was Levirate law. That was Old Testament.
Yeah, that was Jewish.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
you had to, if your husband died, then his brother had to marry you.
Yeah.
And
Gotcha.
it caused all kind of problem.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. Read the story about Judah and Tamar, and you'll have a whole new perspective on that.
What did Jesus say? Suppose that he gets married 5 times and then the brother dies. Then 6 times. And Jesus is like, why are you asking me this?
Exactly. You're being ridiculous.
Yeah, he's like, why are you asking me this?
And then
just stop.
That it was the Sadducees that were asking him that. Mm-hmm. And Jesus says, like, their question was, whose husband will she be in the resurrection? Right. And Jesus is like, you don't even believe in a resurrection. Why are you even asking this?
Why are you asking?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
anyway. Didn't you preach on Tamar?
Yeah.
All right, I was going to say, I know that.
Wasn't it?
It was a Mother's Day.
It was Mother's Day,
I was going to say, I remember that one. Yeah.
Yeah. She. There you go. That's women in leadership right there.
That's probably my favorite Mother's Day sermon I've heard.
Yeah, I've done Tamar.
Did Bathsheba?
I did Bathsheba. I did Rahab.
Yep.
Yeah, just fun stuff. Okay, but what we see is Jesus with the woman at the well.
Right.
Okay, so he has this conversation with her. He's not supposed to be talking to Samaritans, let alone woman Samaritans.
Yeah.
But he goes there intentionally to have this conversation.
Yes, the Samaria was out of the way.
Actually, this is the funny thing about Samaria. It was actually in the way to go through Samaria. Everybody went out of the way to go around Samaria.
Right, but their planned trip, it had.
They were wondering why they were going through Samaria because nobody did.
Yeah, they're like,
Gotcha.
You're going through South Memphis right now.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. But he goes there to have this encounter, and so he has this conversation with the woman, and he allows her. They get into a theological discussion. This is, and so
isn't she kind of like, "Why are you talking to me?"
Oh yeah, that's exactly what she says.
Yeah.
What are you doing talking to a woman, let alone a Samaritan? And so anyway, she says, well, when the Messiah comes, he will explain all things to us. And Jesus says, I am.
Yeah.
I am.
I am.
And she gets it. I mean, like she gets it. And so she runs back into town and tells everybody about the Messiah.
Yep.
She, I know we're splitting hairs here. Is it preaching? Is it not preaching? It didn't involve a pulpit.
Well, she is the messenger.
Jesus chose her to be the first evangelist.
Yeah.
And it happened to be in Samaria because they weren't listening in Jerusalem.
They wouldn't listen back home.
Forget about it. I'm going out here where they'll listen.
That's right.
And a woman proclaims the gospel, and it says they all came out to meet him, and they all became believers.
That's right.
She brought people to Jesus. She brought men to Jesus.
Literally.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Exactly. And there's a cool scene at the end of that when the disciples get back and they basically kind of chastise him for all that stuff. And he says, hey, the fields are white with harvest.
Yep.
Well, the Samaritan men were in the habit of wearing white robes because they wanted to project themselves as being more holy than the Jews.
Yep.
And so he's looking at this field of white-robed men, and he says the fields are white with harvest.
But the workers are few.
That's exactly right.
The workers are few.
That's it. So there weren't any men around, so I had to use a woman. No, not at all. And then, of course, this is highly debated, and I'm not going to get into big arguments, but it is no coincidence that the women were the first ones to know about the resurrection.
Yeah, sure.
That I don't believe that was just an accident.
Yeah.
I don't believe that they were just in the habit of getting up earlier than the men and, so on and so forth. No, this was the way it was designed.
My biggest beef throughout that whole narrative is everyone's like, well, women were the first one there, blah, blah. Where were the disciples?
Exactly.
For 3 years, they knew this guy said he was coming back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Where were they at on the day he was supposed to come back?
Yeah, they should have been.
They were hiding behind locked doors. Where were the women?
Yeah.
They were there waiting.
Dang, I had an alarm set and everything. I just slept right through that thing.
Yeah.
But even when Jesus appears to Mary, he says, now go and tell the others.
Yep.
Go and tell. That, proclamation. It's just what it is. Okay. So that's kind of, the flavor of the Gospels. And you find it in all four of the Gospels here and there. Once you see it, you'll see it everywhere.
Yeah.
And then we get into Paul's ministry. Okay. This is where it gets really down deep. It gets a little bit this is where all the arguments happen. And like I say, we're not going to solve all of them. I want to put the evidence out there for you.
Paul always causing problems.
Everywhere he went, he caused problems.
Paul's always causing problems.
So in Romans 16, 16 verse 7, Paul is greeting everybody. Okay, so he says, all of these are in Romans 16. He says, I commend to you. Now, this is the letter to the Romans. Mm-hmm. This is Paul's whole discourse to the Romans. He's never going to get to the Roman church, so he's going to write everything down that they need to know. Yeah. And he's going to deliver it to them. And so he's commending to you our sister Phoebe, Okay, so commending them, that means she comes with authority. You need to accept and acknowledge her and honor her. That's what he would do that if he was commending Timothy, if he was commending anybody.
Yep.
It's an important word right
him.
there. Yes, exactly right. She's official, who is a servant of the church. Okay, that word is deaconess. She's a deaconess of the church. Now, some will say that doesn't mean hardly anything. It just means, one who serves. Mm-hmm. So she could be a servant. She could be, making the casseroles. And it could have been that. But then it says that you receive her in the Lord in a manner worthy of the saints, holy ones, and that you help her in whatever matter she may have need of you, for she herself has also been a helper of many and of myself as well. Okay? So take that word helper for whatever you want, but she has a place of authority, and she also has been taught.
Yep.
She has been schooled.
On the level of saints.
That's exactly right. Now, beyond the fact that she is chosen, most scholars would tell you, I'm not the only one who thinks this, most New Testament scholars now will tell you that Phoebe was chosen to carry the letter to the Romans.
Yeah.
And so there was a particular thing about the one chosen to carry the letter. They didn't just drop it off and say, here, go for it.
Here's your inbox.
They were supposed to not just read the letter, but they were supposed to perform the letter. Mm-hmm. That was the word that they used, to perform the letter for all the people, reading it start to finish, and along the way, embellishing and clarifying and say, when we get to this part, so she would have been in on at least some of the writing of the letter.
Yeah.
Because Paul would...
So like acting out a play?
Yeah. That's exactly right. That's exactly what they would do.
It's first century voicemail.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a...
Singing telegram.
It was a style of communication.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so she would have explained things along the way. She would have taught things along the way. So this is what the letter carrier did.
Yeah.
Was that because of potential differences in their language and stuff?
Well,
why?
Certainly some of that, but you have to remember they didn't have a New Testament.
Yeah.
It didn't exist. So the only thing that they knew is they knew some about Jesus' life that the Gospels hadn't been written yet.
Yeah.
So they just knew the stories from the eyewitnesses, and they knew that Jesus had been crucified and that he had risen again.
Yeah.
Right.
That's as far as they got. Paul is, in his missionary work, he's starting churches among the Gentiles who didn't even hardly know that.
Yeah.
The Romans probably would have known about that because there's a lot of Jewish Romans and things like that. But when he gets out into Philippi and all that kind of stuff, they don't know who Jesus is at all.
Yeah. Gotcha.
So he spends a certain amount of time with them. Well, he doesn't get to spend time at Rome, so he sends Phoebe. I commend to you our sister Phoebe, that you receive her in the Lord in a manner worthy of the saints. That means listen to her when she's going to do her thing.
Yeah.
And you think he would have picked someone that he thought very highly of to do this?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Completely.
Yeah.
And she's not just a helper like she cleans up after me and does my dishes. Yeah. It's a helper.
This is an important task.
Yeah.
It absolutely is. And then he goes on to say, greet Priscilla and Aquila, my fellow workers in Christ Jesus. Mm-hmm. These are church planters. There's this cat named Apollos, who was super good looking and a great speaker. He is like a celebrity pastor. He's been pastoring, only he's only got a little bit of the correct information. And so he's kind of starting to do more harm than good. And so Paul pulls in Apollos, and he says, I ain't got time to school you right now, so I'm going to send you to my friends, Priscilla and Aquila. He met them while he was making tents, right? So they were two tents. Anyway.
Paul was a tent maker.
Yes.
So who is Aquilus?
Well, Aquila is Mr. Priscilla.
That's exactly right. Because here's the thing is, why is he mentioned second?
Well, the orders of names are very important.
Yes.
And it's no coincidence that, Paul wrote it down that way, or he ordered to have it written that way.
I am still on the fence that Priscilla may have written the book of Hebrews.
I know. My best friend Michael Heiser says there's a few difficulties with that, but he doesn't rule it out. I almost think that's why the Book of Hebrews doesn't have a title of an author.
I am seriously on the fence about it.
I know. These were theologically very advanced people.
Yeah.
Yep.
Priscilla and Aquila. They were qualified to do everything that Paul was qualified to do. That's why he calls them my fellow workers in Christ Jesus, who for my life risked their own necks, to whom not only do I give thanks, but to also all the churches of the Gentiles. And then he goes on with his greetings. Greet the church that is in their house. In their house.
So they got a house church.
And they're the, I don't know, overseers? Elders?
That she is mentioned first?
Shepherds?
Don't you say it! Don't you say it!
Yeah, and so her being mentioned first would.
That's an authority spot. That's placing you in authority when you're mentioned first.
I'm just laying it out there. You can do with it. You can disagree with me all day long. It doesn't matter to me. It's okay. Also,
you can't even say it's in alphabetical order. Don't even make sense.
No, it does not.
No, it does not. No.
Greet Epanetus, my beloved, who is the first convert to Christ from Asia. Greet Mary, who has worked hard for you. Greet Andronicus and Junia.
Who is Junia?
Junia used to be known as Junius for a long time. He says, they are my kinsmen and my fellow prisoners who are outstanding among the apostles.
Huh.
Outstanding among the apostles.
So, to be among the apostles.
Andronicus and Junia. Now, the reason that they put the S on the end for so long is that makes it a man's name. But realistically, the vast number of manuscripts that we have do not have the S on the end, so it's Junia, which is a female name.
Right.
Everybody in the world accepts Junia as a female name now. Here's Dr. Rob Dixon. He says, it's possible you've never heard the name Junia before. There are at least two reasons for that. For one thing, she's only mentioned in one verse in Romans. For another, for generations, Junia was systematically removed from our Bibles.
But she was a woman apostle, right?
Yeah. Junia, and Scott McKnight, who wrote Reading Revelation for Everyone.
Okay, yeah.
Big time Bible scholar, New Testament scholar, says Junia was a woman and she was an apostle. But since a woman couldn't be an apostle, Junia became the male Junius. There's no evidence in ancient manuscripts that anyone understood Junia as a male. No evidence in translation she was a male. No ancient evidence that Junius was a man's name. But still the church got into a rut and wrote it out until some courageous folks said, oh yes, Junia was a woman and she was an apostle and we've been wrong and we're going to do something about it.
They misgendered her.
They did. Then
Shut
that
up.
caused us to use improper pronouns.
I was going to say, how dare them in 2024? That is not.
Do not do that.
You stupid.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing now. She is somehow connected to Andronicus. Well, he says, greet Andronicus and Junia, my kinsmen.
Yeah.
They're married. I mean, it's his husband and wife.
Yeah.
So he's an apostle too.
So then this poor dude, they've been saying he's gay for a long time.
That's exactly right.
They're ruining his reputation.
Maybe they were just really good friends. Anyway, so there were other apostles, people like Barnabas and Silas and Apollos and Timothy and Epaphroditus. Add Junia to your list, he says. She's an apostle. She's not only an apostle, she's outstanding among the apostles. For Paul, Junia is somebody that the entire Roman Church should acknowledge and honor, somebody that we should acknowledge and honor. So that's just a little bit on Junia that we have.
Gotcha.
And
I never knew that about adding the S on the end.
Yeah,
makes it male.
Yeah, I found that out, and it kind of rocked my world there for a minute.
Yeah, now I'm thinking of all the names.
Yes, and just to elaborate a little bit more on Phoebe as well, because this is all kind of connected here. It says Phoebe was part of a larger cohort of women who partnered closely with the Apostle Paul. Women such as Chloe, Nympha, Aphia, Euodia, and Syntyche, and Junia. So sometimes Paul gets labeled as being anti-women, but Phoebe and her sisters would surely testify otherwise.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the text tells us that Phoebe's home base is Cenchrea, a coastal town about 5 miles southeast of the city of Corinth. From Paul's words in Romans 16, we know that there was a Christian church in Cenchrea and that Phoebe had some sort of significant role in the life of the church. So then we went through the whole letter carrier thing, all that stuff. Okay, so there is. Let me make sure I got all this. Yep, I got all that. Okay, so now we get to the good stuff.
Revelation?
No, we're going to deal with Revelation at some other time. But we're going to talk about the big time scriptures for why everybody says it is absolutely unbiblical and unholy and ungodly to have women in positions of leadership in the church, because it says it right there in plain sight.
Okay.
First Timothy.
Plain sight. Well, the first one we'll go to is in 1 Corinthians. This
In
is
Genesis 1, in the beginning, God said no.
Yeah, God said, get in the kitchen. Anyway, 1 Corinthians 14 is one that people often get into. Mm-hmm. And it says, let the women keep silent in the churches, for they are not permitted to speak, but let them subject themselves, just also as the law says. And if they desire to learn anything, let them ask their own husbands at home, for it is improper for a woman to speak in church. Okay? So here's one problem with thinking that is about women never being preachers or pastors or anything like that.
Yeah.
First of all, it's not talking about, has nothing to do with church leadership.
Right.
There is nothing in there where Paul is talking about being a shepherd or leading a flock or anything else like that. And most of my complementarian friends would agree with that.
Yeah.
But also, earlier, just 3 chapters earlier in 1 Corinthians 11:5, it says, but every woman who has her head uncovered while praying or prophesying disgraces her head.
Oh. So that's okay, but the other one's not. See, this is what I'm confused about, is when our theology has lack of consistency.
So a woman can pray and prophesy. Prophesy is declaring the word of the Lord. Remember?
As long as they got their head covered.
Yeah, that's right. But he says, let the women keep silent in the churches. Okay, so what we're talking about here in chapter 14, if you look back in early church history, first century church, we kind of get an idea of how their church services were conducted and arranged.
Yeah.
Most of the time they were smaller gatherings inside somebody's larger house, so you could fit anywhere from 15 to maybe 50 people in there.
It was men in the center, women
That's it.
outward,
It was
right?
in a circle.
And so if women were to speak, they would have to yell.
Well, the women had to take care of the children as well. The children, it was important for the men to hear.
Right.
Okay, so the women would be on the outside. Now, this was a family type atmosphere, so it wasn't at all uncommon for a little bit of conversation to happen during the message. They didn't have, they had the Old Testament in Greek, you know, to use, and they had some of Paul's writings and things like this.
So they weren't like, shut up, woman.
No, they were not. But what was happening is the women were not able to hear as well, and so they'd ask for clarification. Say, what did you just say there? Because I really want to get that. I missed that.
Yeah.
And he said, no, don't do that. Don't do that.
Wait till you get home.
Yeah. And he says, if you miss anything, then when you get home, then your husband can fill you in because he's on the inside. And we don't want you on the inside because the kids and the thing.
Yeah.
And so this is just simply about having order in worship and not having chaos.
Well, that would be just downright logical and logistical.
It would make a lot of sense.
How dare you?
And one of the things that Paul is talking about, especially in 1 Corinthians and even in the second letter, is he wants to be very careful about order in their worship services because they were in this very pagan area.
Yep.
And they had this pagan worship. And what would happen is everything would be orderly up to a certain point, and then like the women prostitutes would appear and the signal went out, and all of a sudden it would start to degenerate into chaos.
Yep.
People started going to the bathroom.
They get Corinthianized.
Yeah. Well, and and this is also why he tells women and men to dress a particular way, and specifically not a particular way, because he didn't want anybody coming into their gathering and imagining it was a pagan worship service.
So the prostitutes would try to like sabotage their worship?
No, they were part of their worship. No, the pagan worship. The prostitutes were, then they were very aggressive.
Yeah.
Like they would come on to you. And this is why Paul says, women, don't act like you're too aggressive.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Because we don't want to give the wrong impression.
Yeah.
And so they didn't have prostitutes coming into their Christian worship services, but when they would have, inquirers, the people who were curious, it would be like if things started going haywire and the women started getting kind of aggressive, it was like, oh, okay.
We see what's going on here. Yeah.
They're no different from everybody else. Paul's he's concerned about the image of the church.
Yeah.
And this is also localized to Corinth.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and there's things we can draw out of this, but this whole head covering issue, nobody observes that.
Right.
I mean, it used to be that women wore hats to church.
Yeah.
But then they wouldn't let them pray and prophesy, so kind of blew that one out of the water.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we get to the big one. Big one. We're going to spend all of the rest of our time pretty much on this one. Yeah. So we get to 1 Timothy. Now, I just want to read the passage to you, and that'll get us kind of set up here. He's talking, this is a letter to Timothy, his protege.
Personal letter.
Timothy is in Ephesus. Yeah, it's a personal letter. And, he's giving him words of instruction. I imagine, like we studied with the epistles, the letters, we're getting one side of the conversation. So it's almost as if you were listening to somebody talking on the phone.
Yeah.
You can kind of get an idea, but you have to imagine the conversation that's happening on the other end.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So it's pretty clear that Timothy has written to Paul because he's having some issues, having some health issues, having some leadership issues, having some church organizational issues.
He's freaking out a little.
He is freaking out a little.
Yeah.
Because Paul calms him down. He says, hey, I want you to take a little wine for your stomach.
Yeah.
Because it's clear
that you some of that non-fermented grape juice for your stomach.
He said, grab some of the Welch's and calm down.
Get you a bottle of Mucinex. And go wild on it. Okay, so here's
you inside jokes in there.
Yeah. So he's helping Timothy out, and he says in verse 9, he says, likewise, I want women to adorn themselves with proper clothing, modestly and discreetly. Here we got that modesty thing again. Yeah,
modest is hottest.
He's not telling them to not dress suggestively. He's talking about so as to display their wealth.
Yeah.
Not with braided hair and gold or pearls or costly garments, but rather by means of good works, as befits women making a claim to godliness. And here's where we get into it. He says in verse 11, let a woman quietly receive instruction with entire submissiveness. But I do not allow a woman to teach or exercise authority over a man, but to remain quiet. For it was Adam who was first created, and then Eve. And it was not Adam who was deceived, but the woman, being quite deceived, fell into transgression. But women shall be preserved through the bearing of children if they continue in faith and love and sanctity with self-restraint.
Oh, there it is. That's closed book. I mean, women be quiet, have some babies, make a sandwich.
Yeah.
That's the one that I've heard on that side.
So that's right there, face value.
Well, let me get. Okay, so here's the thing. Here's the thing that we have to ask ourselves. We see what Paul is doing with Phoebe and with Junia.
Yep.
We see what Paul, all the list of women that he's
working
holding in high esteem, Aquila and Priscilla.
Yep.
We see that Paul is elevating women to positions of leadership and authority. He's telling them they can prophesy. They wants them to prophesy. Just make sure you cover your head. All these different kinds of things. These are pretty revolutionary concepts in their time.
Yeah.
So how do we have to ask ourselves, how do we make sense?
Right.
How do we make sense of this? That on one hand, Paul is speaking so enthusiastically about women and entrusting them with things, and then all of a sudden he turns around and says to Timothy, hey, we've gone too far. I mean, how do you make sense of it, Logan?
I don't know. Well, I guess kind of like we said, I feel like the context of what's going on is what's relevant. Like what I feel like it's tailored for that situation that Timothy's in.
It feels very occasional.
Yeah.
Paul is addressing each occasion as it happens.
Yeah.
Because putting a woman in charge here is not going to be exactly what's needed here. But there's a specific situation going on in this area that's not going on here.
Yeah.
So Paul's not going to give a solution that's for what's happening over here to over here.
Yeah.
Like Paul is handling each one of these personal letters. Like I said, we only get half the phone call here. Paul's dealing something with Timothy at this very specific situation.
Yeah.
And this isn't a letter to the church. This is a letter to Timothy. Okay? So I really think he's telling Timothy, this is what you handle with this situation which you wrote to me about.
Yeah.
You are both correct in all those things. And I don't think any serious student of the Bible would argue with you.
We got our gold stars.
So then, what we have to ask ourselves is, what was going on there that Paul is speaking to? Now, you're correct in that all of the epistles are occasional documents.
Yeah.
They are written for a particular occasion, and so we can get truth from them, but very little in the epistles is what we would call prescriptive.
Right.
Like applicable
For all churches at all times.
Yeah.
Now we can get all of sin that comes short of the glory of God. We can get that.
Yeah.
We're saved by grace, justified by faith. All those things. These are hard, fast theological truths we can bank on.
But
Yeah.
I would say that this isn't a prescription. This is a description of what's going on at that time.
Absolutely. Now it reminds me of when Jesus said, if your right hand offends you, cut it off.
Yep. Or your eye.
Or your right eye offends you, pluck it out.
Now, is he really telling you to do that? Or is
Right.
he telling you to do
Yes.
some surgery on yourself and clean up what's making
all
you
of
sin?
us are sitting here and we have our hands and our eyes.
Well, yeah.
And so if you're going to try to hold the line about everything is literal in the Bible,
You have to start covering your head. Where's the consistency?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, that's
My head's
cultural.
covered.
you can't pick and choose.
Yep.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
just can't pick and
You
choose.
have to be able to distinguish.
So we have to look at all this stuff one way or another,
Right.
right?
what's
Yeah.
historical, what's cultural, and
Okay,
what's not.
so I will tell you that first of all, yes, this is situational. Yes, this is descriptive, not prescriptive. Paul is not saying, Timothy, I want you to broadcast this to all the churches of all time. Timothy doesn't have access to all the churches at all times.
Yeah.
Paul is writing a personal letter to Timothy. There's personal, very intimate details in this letter, and he's replying to Timothy, who shared all this personal, intimate detail with him.
And like you said earlier, that they do not have the New Testament, but this letter that Paul just opens up is going to be part of the New Testament one day.
It will one
You
day.
know what I
That's
mean?
exactly
Yeah.
right, and I'm glad that it is. So I will tell you this: nobody knows what was going on.
Right.
Nobody is certain what was going on in Timothy's world that he had to write Paul.
Right.
So the best we can do is educated speculation.
Yeah.
And I don't ever do educated speculation unless it makes a whole lot of stuff
Right.
make a whole lot more sense.
Yep.
And so this is to some degree speculation, but it is very educated speculation. I've read several different scholars who have speculated in this way, and it is the argument that helps all of this come together.
Yeah.
So what was happening, we do know that what was happening, what would happen later on in Timothy's ministry career and later on in the life of the church, this thing called Gnosticism.
Yep.
Gnosticism shows up, and Gnosticism, it's from the word knowledge. They have special knowledge, knowledge that nobody else has, and they're going to show you this knowledge if you stick with them. And if you believe like what we believe, you'll have a secret path to heaven. It was this.
Yeah.
It was a heresy.
Is this the same thing as the widows and true widows?
Yeah, we're going to get into that in just a second.
Okay.
Yes, because this is what's happening here.
Okay, gotcha.
What's happening here is not full-blown Gnosticism, but we see the beginning seeds of Gnosticism already coming into play. Now, Gnosticism basically believed that the spirit and the flesh were completely separate. The spirit was the only good thing about you. The rest of your flesh was rotten.
Yeah.
There was nothing good about it. They believed that when you died, your body just rotted and your spirit went away to somewhere, you know.
And this is where it was okay as long as you didn't sin in the spirit, right?
Exactly.
You can sin in the flesh,
That's it.
but not in the spirit.
That's exactly right.
Gotcha, okay.
Yeah.
I'm tracking.
What?
Yeah.
That means you can go out and do whatever you want as long as your spirit didn't, you know.
Yeah.
Like, as long as your spirit wasn't in it.
Yeah, you can do it, but my heart wasn't in it.
That's it. Yeah. So they could literally, they could participate in all of these pagan religions. They could go out and they could just.
They could go have a prostitute and be like, well, my heart just wasn't in it.
Yeah, they can go to temple
or you could have your spirit cleansed and everything's okay.
Yep.
You know.
Okay.
Oh yeah. It's false teaching. It's false teaching.
Sounds very much like it.
Yeah. So, but what was happening here? We see the beginning seeds of this now. Here's another thing that was happening at the time. We can relate to this because that's what's happening in our culture today. Young people were very reluctant to get married.
Yep.
They were just not doing it.
Yeah.
And so also women were terrified. Many women were terrified to have children because there was a lot of pain involved and there's no doctors of any kind really. There's no guarantee you're going to get out of it alive.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they were just like, nah. I mean, these were generally middle class to upper class people.
Yep.
So what you had here is you have these sort of in your communities, you have these groups of women, young women. Now, if you look into chapter 5, he talks about widows. He says, honor widows who are widows indeed.
Yep.
That means who've actually lost their husbands.
Yeah.
Because widows was kind of a blanket term for single women.
Yep, unmarried.
Yeah. So not the ones that had just never married.
But if any widow has children or grandchildren, let them first learn to practice piety in regard to their own family to make some return to their parents. So he's talking about, responsibility here.
Yeah.
He says, now she who is a widow indeed and who has been left alone, who has fixed her hope on God and continues in prayers night and day, that's the ones you're going to help, okay?
Yep.
But he says, if anyone does not provide for his own, especially for his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. Let a widow be put on the list, that's the list for assistance, only if she is not less than 60 years old, having been the wife of one man, having a reputation for good works, and so on and so forth. But refuse to put younger widows on the list, for when they feel sensual desires in disregard of Christ, they want to get married, thus incurring condemnation, because they have set aside their previous pledge. So here you get this kind of idea that Paul's not too fond of the ones who are not widows indeed.
Yep.
Yeah. The pretend widows.
Yeah, he says, I want younger widows to get married, bear children,
Yep.
keep house, because some have already turned aside to follow Satan. Okay, there's a breadcrumb.
That sounds like a bad thing.
Yeah. So these younger widows are not wanting to get married. They're not wanting to have children. He says, for some, they have already turned aside to follow Satan.
Yeah.
Yep.
False teaching.
Gnosticism.
We got this here. Okay.
Yeah.
So what's happening here, what we speculate is happening here, and I think it makes everything fit together, is one of the teachings of Gnosticism, and also one of the teachings of the pagan religion of the day, which centered around Artemis, the Greek goddess and everything, was that the teaching was that Eve was created first. Adam proceeded out of her.
Yep.
And this is kind of one of these convoluted things where it was it breeded this sort of woman forward kind of thing, woman dominated kind of idea.
Yeah.
So you combine the pagan religion with the Gnosticism, and you can see how these communities of young women who now had nothing to do were sitting around, and they were spreading this false teaching among themselves.
Yeah.
And so they were part of the church family and the church community, but they were idle, and they
It's just like today. People, same thing I've been saying today. People need hobbies.
Yes, they
These
do.
women needed hobbies.
They needed hobbies.
And also, too, when he says, God created Adam first, and it was Eve that was deceived. And if we're going to go back to that Genesis paradigm that we understood, when God created Adam, mankind, he created them together. But then it was Eve that was deceived. It was that separation that led to deception.
Well, and I mean, where was Adam?
He was right there.
Standing right. They were both deceived.
And for me, that's saying, this is just Pat. This is just saying that separated is when bad things happen.
They did the good things as a team, and they did the bad things as a team. That's right. But here's
Adam,
the thing.
I think the sun was in his eyes. He was like, "What are you doing over there?"
But then, so if you taught that Eve was created first, thereby was the dominant one, then your teaching is that Adam was the one deceived.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So Paul is not outlining a theology here.
Yeah.
That's what he did in Romans. That's what he does in Galatians. That's what he does in Ephesians, because he wrote them to the churches.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's combating what the Gnostics is saying.
He's saying, Timothy, you got to set this thing straight. You got to nip it in the bud, as Barney Fife would say, before it gets out of hand.
Yeah.
Get your one bullet out your pocket and go to business.
And you got to get a handle on these young women. And tell them what I told you.
Yeah.
Tell them that you don't get to be put on the list unless you're 60 or over. So if you're younger than that and you're a busybody, you need to get married and you need to have some kids.
Yeah.
Okay, but now, here we go with let a woman quietly receive instruction with entire submissiveness.
Okay.
In other words, it's revolutionary enough for Paul to say that these women can learn, because that wasn't done.
Yep.
Yeah.
They get to receive, they get to be discipled.
Yep.
They get to, but they can't be speaking out of turn and talking all this mess.
Yeah, because they just had Gnosticism beaten to their head.
This was the uprising, and the whole Aphrodite kind of BS kind of
Come
permeating the atmosphere.
Learn.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Learn with submissiveness. Listen to the ones that are teaching you.
Yeah.
And then he says, I do not allow a woman to teach or exercise authority. That is the word AUTHENTAIN. Okay, so the word AUTHENTAIN, and I've got I'll see if I can find AUTHENTAIN in here. Yes, here it is. This word appears nowhere else in the New Testament. It appears as a verb only here, and about 4 other occurrences in all literature of the period. This is nowhere in the Bible, only 4 instances in any kind of literature at that time.
Yeah.
So we don't even know where Paul got this word from.
He made it up.
Maybe he did.
Scubalon.
Yeah.
It begins to occur more often several hundred years later. Okay, so the noun forms appear more often in extra-biblical literature, and they are typically strong and emotionally laden words with negative or dominating overtones, such as murderer,
okay.
domestic murderer, perpetrator, autocrat. The verb form is sometimes used for murdering someone or for murdering oneself, suicide. That's clearly not the application here. The more applicable uses of this word have to do with something like the word domineer. According to this scholar named Belleville, in all known extra-biblical instances of AUTHENTAIN or AUTHENTAIN, rare though they may be, prior to the 2nd century AD, without exception, have to do with power or domination. The context of a financial dispute over the price for ferrying cattle. I had my way with him, and so on and so forth. So here it goes on to sort of elaborate. It said Paul had several verbs at his disposal that would mean specifically to have authority, as the 1984 NIV improper translates. They updated it to say assume authority. That's only marginally better, he says.
Nice shot there.
Yeah, Paul is concerned that women had started to teach and domineer over men in the same way that men had previously done to women. And it's not surprising that women in Ephesus would do that. Now, he goes on to talk about the goddess Artemis, talks about the pagan religions, also talking about the seeds of Gnosticism that are rising up. And it says here, Paul is not concerned with women teaching, but rather misusing their new permission to learn and their ingestion of false doctrine that purported to be more special than everybody else's as permission to dominate. In a murderous way, and given they had a lot of time on their hands because they weren't getting married and they weren't having children,
they weren't fishing, they weren't hunting.
So Paul is talking about this erroneous false teaching when he says it was Adam who was first created, then Eve. He's like, no, it wasn't Eve first.
Yeah,
it was, and then since you're saying Eve was created first, so Adam was the one deceived. No, it's the other way around.
Yeah.
Adam was created first, so Eve was the one deceived. He's not making a judgment call. He's just talking about the actual way it actually happened.
Yeah.
So he's not saying, like some would say, that, oh yeah, well, Paul says it was Eve that was deceived. So clearly women are the weaker creature. They are more emotional, and so they're more susceptible to deception. It's a bunch of crap.
Well, even though when she was deceived, they were still equally perfect at that time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's exactly right.
What do you think? I'm curious. Wonder how, I mean, this is just my own curiosity. Wonder how Paul would have addressed this. Let's say that it was the men that were the ones that were being caught up into this Gnosticism, and they weren't marrying and all this stuff. I wonder, do you think he would have wrote and been like, make the men be quiet? I mean, what do you think?
Actually, he would have said, put them out of the church.
Yeah,
be done with them.
Yeah,
because he says that in 1st and 2nd Corinthians.
Okay, yeah.
And the ones that Paul mostly the ones that he says throw out of the church are the ones that are teaching false teachings.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So he would have just said kick them out. He's not wanting to kick the women out.
Yeah.
You know, he's keeping them close. But here's the final part of this. It wasn't Adam who was deceived. Eve was deceived. And then it says, women shall be preserved through the bearing of children if they continue in faith and loved and sanctity with self-restraint. That word preserved is very important. Some translations say saved through childbirth. And that makes no sense at all. I mean, that's a problem.
Does that mean saying you won't die?
That's exactly what it's saying.
How dare it make sense?
That the Lord will be with you through childbirth. Yeah, that's exactly what it says.
Exactly. You're not going to die.
You will be. You don't need to shy away from childbirth. Tell them that.
And then all of a sudden it makes sense.
All of a sudden the fog begins to lift. Okay, so one final point to make, and then I'm going to let this rest for a while. Okay. Unless there's anything else you guys want to bring up.
Because women can't wear pants.
That's it. Especially not yoga pants. Okay, so there's one other little thing in here. Now, I want to preface this by saying, if you read a lot of the newer translations, including the the English Standard Version, and the NIV.
No, you said it
right. I apologize, Lord. I apologize. I really do apologize.
You know what that just reminded me of?
What?
You ever watched Larry the Cable Guy much?
I used to.
You know, he'd say like a raunchy joke, and he'd be like, God forgive me for that one.
God bless the pygmies.
God bless the starving pygmies. That's kind of what I felt like right there.
All right. Thanks for that memory.
If you look in all of these popular translations of the Bible, you will see that in the last probably 25 years, every time Paul says brothers, most of those instances, it should be brothers and sisters, because we know that women were present.
Yeah.
And he's speaking to both. And even, in fact, when he says, act like men, actually, most of the translations have said something like, be courageous. Because that's really kind of what he's getting at here. Yeah, exactly. Even the women man up. Yeah. So anyway, I want to preface that by, this is where we get to with this. And this is... like it or not, this is a scholarly thing. I am not making this up. Okay, I didn't.
Sure, you are.
I didn't just download this off the internet yesterday. It says it is a trustworthy statement. If a man aspires to the office of overseer, it is a fine work he desires to do. Okay, so overseer. That's also bishop. Mm-hmm. And there's all these other terms. There is elder. There is a bishop, overseer. I would probably take issue with the idea that elder and pastor are the exact same word, because pastor is mentioned in Ephesians 4 specifically, and it is the word for shepherd.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So we get a different tone to that word. So, but I do agree that elders often had sort of functioned as pastors.
Pastoral roles.
Overseer, bishop, all those kinds of things. So it says, an overseer then must be above reproach, the husband of one wife. Now, that's kind of a, open and shut. Okay, so it's got to be a man. All the elders, all the pastors, they got to be a man.
Isn't that the spouse of one spouse?
That's exactly what I'm getting at.
Okay.
Because this is the same kind of writing when we said brothers.
Yeah, and sisters,
And it's brothers and sisters.
Right.
And so do the research. Don't take my word for it. Go do your study. An overseer then must be above reproach, the spouse of one spouse.
Yep.
So it would be the wife of one husband or the husband of one wife. Now, some people also incorrectly take this to mean that anybody who's had a wife previously or had a husband previously is disqualified from ministry. That's not what it says. It's not what it means. Paul is saying the spouse of one spouse at a time.
Can't have two.
Can't have two. Can't have three. Can't have one primary and one on the side.
Concubines.
Can't do that. So that is, and I know Paul uses he through all this. This is very typical of their culture and the writing of the time. They just didn't take time to broaden out the pronouns and do all that kind of thing. But he does also says. He says that women must likewise be dignified, not malicious gossips, but temperate, faithful in all things. Why does he say that? He says, let deacons be husbands of only one wife. We know that women were deacons.
Yep. Yeah. And the gossip part too is you can't be gossiping. This is directly talking about that Gnosticism.
Yeah, and think about this too. Let deacons be husbands of only one wife, good managers of their children. Isn't that women's work?
Yeah. No, not anymore. Men lead it all in this day.
Yeah. So all of this is more open than we read right off the bat.
Yeah.
There we go. What do you think, Pat?
Yeah, I've never had a problem with it. That's just me. The way my brain works, I was like, God's gonna call whoever He wants to call, and that doesn't matter which bathroom you use. I'm really sure He's because. By the way, the pants thing was because everyone wore dresses back then. There were no pants.
That's exactly right.
But that was my whole thing about it. But I can see where people get hung up on it. But as we've been talking about, start with the exegesis and then lead to a hermeneutic and see where it brings you. And does it really line up? And for me, it doesn't. It doesn't make sense that women can't be in pastoral roles. I'm not even going to say leadership or I'm going to say pastoral. I think women can be pastors.
I do too. What do you think?
No, I agree. Like I said, honestly, it just wasn't something I had ever dove into.
Right.
I've had the conversation because I got good friends on both sides of the aisle.
I do too.
And I mean, both sides make compelling arguments.
Yes, they do.
But
I guess here's the thing too: is no matter how convicted I am that it is or isn't true, that's just my belief. It doesn't have to affect anyone within the church.
And that's kind of where I'm at. Like, to be honest with you, it don't bother me for a woman to be a preacher. Like, in going through this, hearing this just explained better and more to me, it just further. I mean, I didn't have a conviction about it.
You weren't totally against it.
Yeah. Like it wasn't something that bothered me. I was kind of like, I just never thought about it.
Right.
So
here's a few. Well, here's one food for thought, and then there's two things that I hear a lot.
Yeah.
One food for thought is
that rhymed.
You're right. I think I'll just lap it off. So you see so many men in positions of authority arguing so hard against this, and I wonder if there's just some insecurity on their part. Because it seems like we still live in a male-centric culture, and sometimes we just get to be in charge just because we're a man.
Yeah. And then what happens if a woman comes in and does it better than you?
Yeah, well, you say you can't lead because you're not a man.
Right.
And then I don't have to prove myself.
Right.
I don't have to show my competence.
Yep.
I just get to be in charge of the man.
How about we just go with the most qualified person?
That would be the best way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But here's the other thing. Here's the two sort of cultural kinds of things that I hear a lot.
Okay.
I just wasn't raised that way. Well,
all right.
There's a lot of ways that you were raised that you don't do now.
Yeah.
I mean, that is not a good hermeneutic, nor is it good theology to say, well, it just doesn't look right to me because I wasn't raised that way.
Yeah.
Well, you weren't raised with a lot of things, and you weren't raised with the internet.
Yeah.
Right.
So why don't you stay that way?
Yeah, you can't use the internet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, please, let's think harder and think beyond our own just cultural understanding.
I used to say that to people all the time. Well, when they're talking about salvation, people would say, well, I used to do this, I used to do that. And I always go back to, well, I used to wear a diaper, but I gave that up.
That's exactly
so like it's okay.
Don't worry, you'll wear one again.
That's exactly what I was thinking. We'll return to those diapers.
Yeah. And honestly, we just need to think beyond that.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say the one thing, there was one of their arguments that I was going to bring up, but we're pretty much, our time is very late. But
we've got time for one more.
All right. The one piece that kind of, I guess it's almost two, but they said in the 1800s, kind of during, I guess it was a feminist movement.
Yeah, sure.
In that time frame was the first time we actually had like an actual female pastor, I guess, per se. But they said part of the reason we're facing this, I mean, I feel like most people know at this point, there's this kind of the gay minister thing situation.
Sure. Yeah.
And they claim that this is what opened the door for them. And they said that's how they manipulate the text. They say, well, if y'all can say that it was open for interpretation for women to be leaders, then we can interpret it to mean that homosexuals could be leaders.
I would say is, how are we going to confuse someone's gender with something else?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not going to say, well, if you're a male or female, if you're Tom Brady or if you're Ted Bundy, you can be a pastor. No, that's like apples and oranges. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. That's just where I'm at with it. That's like a far extreme.
This is the like LGBT's approach at how they.
No, I know because they reinterpret certain things in Scripture.
Yeah.
I've done study extensively on both sides.
Yeah.
I mean, I really have. I've dug down deep into both of these.
Yeah.
The reason why we didn't have women ministers or church leaders until the 1800s is because as soon as Paul and his people died off and the church was sort of popularized,
Romanized,
Constantine and all that kind of stuff, then the early church fathers and the early church scholars, that's when they put the S on the end of Junia.
Yep.
And that's when they really, really started to take a hard turn and make all the translations very male-centric.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And so it stayed that way for a long, long time until, like Scott McKnight says, a very highly respected New Testament scholar, somebody called BS on this stuff and says, we got to undo bad translation.
Yeah.
So that's what this is about. The other issue on human sexuality, which is something we're going to tackle, by the way, next week. So we're...
And also for me, too, it's something that sticks in my head is, the women pastor in America, it's a relatively new thing. Well, man, women couldn't vote in America until the 20th century.
It is... You're exactly right. And that's all that I'll go into it on that because I don't want to be here for another 15 minutes. But the human sexuality issue is reading something. It's creating bad theology. It's not undoing bad theology.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
It's undoing good theology.
Yeah.
And good exegesis and good word translation. You really have to do some scriptural interpretive gymnastics to get away from what Jesus said when he said, have you not read your own scripture that God created them, and this would the male and female and all that.
I guess it was 1 Timothy 2. I think it's 2, isn't it that one where he says sexually immoral?
Yeah.
When he says people that can't be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he lists sexually immoral.
Yeah.
So they're doing some gymnastics to get around that.
You just have to make it not sexually immoral.
Yeah.
And I have, once again, friends on both sides of that, and I have deep respect for, them all.
And that's where I land with that, is being a woman isn't sexually immoral.
Yeah.
Well, and once again, it's undoing what had been covered up.
Yeah.
This is basically creating something that's not there.
Yeah.
In my view. And it's just my view. And we're going to talk about it next week. We're going to get ourselves into the real tall weeds. And you don't have to, please don't take this as we're trying to hammer on anybody.
Yeah,
we're
for
not.
real. Yeah.
And if you don't believe in women pastors, I'm not trying to blast you or anything. I just want us all to think beyond this.
Yeah, it's just an open conversation.
Yeah, because here's the other thing that I hear. Well, when I hear a woman preaching, I just can't take her seriously.
Well,
that's a you problem.
Yeah, so if she's preaching the word of God, then I mean that sounds like a faith problem.
That is a you problem.
Wow. Yeah.
But I hear it. I do.
Yeah.
I just couldn't sit under a woman pastor because I just couldn't take her seriously.
Oh well. Yeah, but you'll listen to that woman's Siri voice when she's giving you directions somewhere. Take a turn left. Yes, ma'am.
They might have changed it to
I'm
a man.
I'm gonna change my voice nav to a
I don't
guy.
use Siri. I don't want the government speaking.
That's exactly right.
Hey, bro, go left.
Anyway, I once again, I'm not criticizing you. I just want to put that out there to help us all think a whole lot better.
Yeah.
One of the most powerful preachers, period, that I've ever heard in my life is a woman. She's just recently passed away. Her name is India Scruggs, and she, for her whole ministry career, pastored a church in right around Huntsville, Alabama. It was about 800 people, and she preached the walls down every single week
In Alabama.
And by the way, she's a person of color, so
look out.
She's got the whole thing working against her.
Yeah.
And she's a legend. And I would drive hours out of my way to go hear her preach.
Man, that's what's up. She
could lay the word down. And if you ever want to get a blessing, just look her up. ENDIA SCRUGGS. India Scruggs. Amazing preacher.
There you go. Well, I feel like we're all pretty well in the same page on this one.
I think so.
Yeah, we are. To varying degrees. Maybe but I do want everybody to know that this is just not. It's a solid scholarship. This is, I don't come to any of this stuff, just wandering.
Well, let us know what y'all think. Leave it in the comments. Is it something that really matters to you? Is it something that's really important? Is it something that's you never thought about till this?
Right.
Yeah.
Let us know.
Yep.
And don't comment you're going to burn in hell, because that's not what this is about. Okay. Because I want to tell you, you won't either. So
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, guys, do the thing. Hit the like, hit subscribe. Like Pat said, leave us a comment. Rate us on Spotify.
Check out the stuff.
We have gained some ratings on Spotify.
Yes, we have.
So we're
creeping forward. Forward.
Yep. All right, guys.
We got some merch coming soon. So,
But me and Pat are going to have some before y'all do.
Yeah, we're getting some tonight.
All right, guys. Catch you next week.
Appreciate you.
Bye.